So good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here. This is our parent education series kickoff. I am Lori Kumar. I'm the director at Tilden, and I'm actually very excited to be inviting back Eric Endlich from Top College Consultants. He's amazing. I talk to him all the time. We refer students over to Eric. Especially students who have an alternative path to colleges, and everything in between. So he's a wonderful source of information and resources. Um, and I also just invite everybody to our series. We'll have a talk every month. I'll invite a speaker, and next month is actually with Classroom Matters, Tatiana Ramos. This is another repeat invite. They're amazing. I think I tell families all the time, they're the gold standard in executive skills coaching. They really are an amazing crew. They have an amazing program. So there's a lot to learn. They're going to be talking about parenting for ADHD. So I'll send more information about that, but I don't want to take away from Eric's presentation. And again, thank you for being here, Eric, and I look forward to learning with everybody.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me, Laura. Lori. That other presentation sounds really good too. Most of our students struggle with executive function issues. In fact, I'm doing another presentation this week on a related topic. So that's definitely of interest to me as well. I'm gonna share my screen and get started. Give me a second. Hopefully that shows up well. So I'm Eric Endlich. I am the founder of Top College Consultants. I'm a clinical psychologist by profession, and I moved into educational consulting full-time several years ago because I really love working with teens, and this time in their life when they're preparing and transitioning to college is really exciting and scary and challenging. So that's a big part of what we address. Most of the students we work with have some type of learning difference or emotional challenge, but we do work with students who don't have any disabilities as well. But we really like helping students who are encountering some sort of challenge in their transition to college. And we help with all aspects of the college readiness and transition process. So that's kind of thinking about whether a student would benefit from a gap year, figuring out what they should do during the gap year, what kinds of summer activities might be good choices for them given their interests and their profile and their needs, helping them find the right kinds of supports in college if they need some type of disability or learning support, building the college list, getting the essays done, preparing for interviews, filling out the Common App, the UC app, all that stuff, and making sure they, get the scholarships they're entitled to. That is actually a photo of a real student of mine from a couple of years ago. And this is the Top College Consultants team. We are a diverse crew with different backgrounds. Lisa and Jenny and Jamie, for example, come from a high school background. Jennifer used to run a tutoring center. Melanie's worked in college settings and so on. So, and we all share a love for this work. So I would love to know from you what your concerns are about college, transition to college, choosing college, you name it. My favorite part of presentations is the dialogue with parents. So I'm actually I don't have a huge number of slides tonight. I'll try to get through them fairly quickly and leave plenty of time for questions. So feel free to start putting your questions in the chat and we will get to them at the end. And I want to start with this concept that getting into college is the easy part. I found myself saying that to people, and then people said to me like, "Oh, I like that. The way you said that. That's a really good point." And so then I actually wrote an article with that title because I started just deciding it was this really important point to get across. What I mean by that is, sure, getting into college is a lot of work. and a lot of thought goes into it. Our students work really hard on their essays and so on. But that's just the beginning of the journey. Then there's 4 more years ahead to get through college. And if you're not ready for college, then all of that, application process could be for naught. And a study from last year from a company called EAB found that, almost a quarter of students said that they didn't feel ready for college. These are high school students, college-bound high school students without disabilities, just a regular general population. So and I think that's been exacerbated by the pandemic. By the way, I can put links to anything I reference into the chat later on if you're wondering, like, where do I find that article? And all the stuff you can find on our website, which is topcollegeconsultants.com. So getting into college is the easy part. As I said, we're going to talk about, being ready for college so that it's not just a matter of getting in, but being able to be successful there. I also co-manage a Facebook group for parents of neurodivergent students. It's now 21,000, almost 22,000 members. So if you have a child with a learning difference, by all means, join our group. It's a great place for parents to get support from each other and learn from each other. I also talk about this distinction between being college capable and college ready. So if you are a high school student and you are taking reasonably challenging courses, honors courses, AP, dual enrollment at a community college, accelerated college, that sort of things, and you are doing well, getting A's and B's in those courses, there's every reason to think that you're going to be ready for the rigor of college, that you'll be able to handle the academic level in college. But that doesn't mean you're college ready, because being successful in college involves a whole lot more than being able to handle the coursework. If you're talking about moving away from home and living at college, you have to be able to handle the independence and all the skills that go along with that, which we're going to get into. So it's important to look at not just, can I get into college? Can I handle the college courses? But am I college ready? And colleges have no window into that. They have no insight into whether your child is college ready or not. All they can do is look at the transcript and the other pieces of the application and say, yep, we think if this student comes to our college, they can handle the coursework here. But they don't know if your child can get themselves up on time, or remember to turn assignments in, or remember to take showers, or brush their teeth, or eat 3 times a day, and you name it. College and high school are pretty different. If you've been to college yourself, you know that. But I just want to highlight a few key points about it. So in particular, sort of the structure of the day. So high school is, for most students, it's a fairly structured day with a fairly long day at school, a lot of hours of class, relatively few hours of homework. Obviously, that depends on what courses you're taking, but it's a fairly structured day. And, of course, not all schools are alike, but in many schools, teachers are fairly proactive, reminding students, hey, there's going to be a test tomorrow. Remember to, turn your paper in next Monday. If your child has special needs, if they're on an IEP or a 504, and not so much in a private school, but in a public school, often there's a lot of services that are sort of delivered to the student. So the student just kind of shows up and all the services and supports are delivered. And its students after school may have band practice or sports practice or SAT prep or doing homework. And so it's a pretty full day. And that's, 5 days a week. In college, typically students are taking fewer courses. They have a lot fewer hours in class. They may have 1 or more days a week when they don't have any classes at all, and they have the whole day to themselves to do whatever they want. But the assignments tend to be more significant, more hours of reading, longer papers to write, and so on. So a lot less structure, in some ways more demands with less structure. And students who need various kinds of support, whether that's tutoring, academic advising, career services, mental health counseling, every college, even colleges that don't have any special programs for students with learning differences, practically every college I've ever been to has tons of resources and services for students. The difference is students have to actively pursue them. Unlike in high school, where a student might be on a program where they're having services delivered, in college, it is up to the student to take the initiative to pursue those services and supports. So what are the three keys? What are the three key areas that students need to strengthen to be successful in college? Number one, self-awareness. That means knowing what are you good at, where are your strengths, and where are the areas where you really could use some support. So strengths, of course, there may be obvious examples like I'm really good in math and I'm not so good in writing, or vice versa. But this also applies to non-academic areas like emotional coping strategies and social skills and self-care and hygiene and self and other areas. So knowing the areas that you're not as strong in kind of helps you figure out where you might need resources, which then leads to self-advocacy. And that is your ability to step forward, to step up, and seek out those resources to get help in the areas that you're not as strong at, whether that means going to your professor for office hours, going to the career center, speaking with your academic advisor, the RA, whatever that might be, scheduling appointments, getting yourself to appointments. And then self-management, that's kind of a broad term to manage your time, keep your motivation and energy level going so that you can get your work done and get through that whole term. Manage your reactions to people if you're having conflicts with a roommate or a disappointment in a romantic relationship, or your reactions to a disappointment, let's say on a test or a paper that you didn't do as well as you thought you were going to. You need to be able to manage your reactions so that you can keep going and continue to go through the next hurdles, and various kinds of habits such as social media, screen time, substance use, and various other things. So to give a few more examples, I mentioned academic strengths, knowing when you need help, knowing the optimal conditions for studying. Are you somebody who studies better at night? Are you a morning person and you have better focus in the morning? Do you do well with quiet, being by yourself, maybe in the library, in a hubby with nobody else around, or do you do better having music on headphones? Knowing the right conditions for studying, knowing how you deal with conflict. Are you somebody who runs away from or avoids conflict, and how is that going to play out if you're living with a roommate? Knowing what healthy relationships are, and if that's something that you struggle with, then what kind of help do you need to make sure you don't get into unhealthy relationships, whether that's friendships or romantic relationships. And then, of course, if you have any medical conditions or mental health conditions, knowing what the signs are when you need help, because you don't have your parents there to say, you don't look so well, I think you better go to the doctor. Self-advocacy skills, that would be in the academic realm, knowing that you're struggling and that you need to talk to your professor or go see a tutor, speaking up in class if things come up, seeking out other kinds of academic resources, mental health counseling if you're struggling emotionally. These are just a few examples of the ways in which students can and need to advocate for themselves. And I mentioned some examples of self-management. It starts at the beginning of the day, getting yourself up on time and getting to class. Often parents are involved in this process in high school, but in college, students need to figure that piece out. Some students say, well, I'm just not going to take any morning classes. That may or may not be a workable solution. Of course, managing your free time so that you're not excessively using social media, substances, or unhealthy patterns, but you're having a healthy balance of schoolwork and other activities. And there are lots of things that parents do that they don't even realize, are going to have to shift when college comes. And I'll talk about that in a second. So you may be thinking like, oh, this is a lot of stuff. What do I do about it? Well, I think of sort of three different time periods when these skills can be enhanced. Number one is while you're still in high school. So your student is not on the verge of leaving high school, then you still have time, whether it's going to a summer program to work on college readiness, going to counseling for mental health issues, getting a tutor or an academic coach to build up your time management skills, taking courses. Um, when my daughter was in high school, she took a course on personal finance, super helpful, really helped her become more ready as an adult to handle money. Think about kind of all the things you do for your child, starting at the beginning of the day to the end of the day, waking them up to telling them to shut off their phones and go to bed, and everything in between, cooking, doing laundry, taking them to appointments, picking up their medication if they're on medication, reminding them, to turn in their assignments. If you're doing some of these things, make a list of what you're doing and think about a plan together, jointly with your child to gradually shift these over. So you don't shift them all over at the same time in one day, but think about kind of drawing up a plan together. You may need to be in the picture at first, so you can explain like, well, this is what let's talk about a potential email to set up an appointment, or what you would say in a phone call in setting up an appointment. So you can coach your child and come up with a script or a plan. Maybe if they've never done laundry before, they're learning to cook, you need to be there to be sure they're doing it properly and not breaking the equipment. And give them constructive feedback and make sure that students create their own reminders so that you can picture and they remember like, oh, every Saturday I've got to do laundry, or once a month I've got to refill my medications and that sort of thing. So we talked about working on skills during high school. And if your child's already towards the end of high school or has already finished high school, you can create, take time between high school and college in a gap year or a post-grad year. And it can be more than 1 year. Most people talk about a gap year, but of course there's no deadline. You can start college at any point in life. But if it's a year between high school and college, potentially you can do any number of things. You can get a job, you can start a business. High school students do start businesses. I see it all the time, whether it's selling products on Etsy or mowing people's lawns or pet sitting or dog walking, lots of things. I've known high school students who are baking and created their own products to bake and sell. You can create an independent project if you have a really strong interest and you want to do some sort of major project or centered around that interest, volunteer work, community service, a paid job, of course, to save up money for college. Or if there's specific skills that you really need to acquire to be ready for college, there are college readiness programs. And that's something that we are frequently referring our students to. Again, if you have questions about any of this stuff, feel free to put those questions into the chat and we'll get to them at the end of the slides. So we talked about working on skills during high school, between high school and college, but once you start college, it's not too late to keep building those skills. If you need help with executive functioning, there may be academic coaches at your college, or you could hire someone independently. If you have mental health challenges, there are colleges that have wellness communities with a sort of a mental health or wellness focus. There's almost always counseling available, mental health counseling, career counseling, academic advising, where you can be building skills, whether it's interview skills for a job or emotion regulation skills to handle disappointments. Tutoring, of course. Most colleges I know offer free peer tutoring, sometimes professional tutoring, which may or may not be at an additional cost. If your child does have a disability, there are various levels of support available in different colleges. And I just have one slide on this topic because I know this is a general audience, but this is something we can certainly talk about in more detail if you have questions. Well, pretty much every college in the country, for all intents and purposes, have disability accommodations at the very minimum. So I think of that as sort of the ground level or the base level. And that's by federal law. And the same thing in most workplaces too, that if you need extra time on testing or need to be able to sit in front of a class or bring a laptop to class or get a note taker or various kinds of disability accommodations, those are available pretty much at every college. Sometimes there's actually more accommodations available in college than there are in high school because there may be more resources and technology available in a college of 10, 20,000 students than there were in a much smaller high school.
Mhm. And you have a fantastic resource for this, Eric, on your website.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll come back to that in a second. So that's sort of the basic level disability accommodations. You can get that anywhere. People, when they think about accommodations, tend to think about academic accommodations, but actually accommodations may be non-academic. They could be in the dining hall, in the residence hall. If a student has mobility issues, they may need accommodations relating to getting around on campus. So it's not just about accommodations in the classroom to access the curriculum. So again, basic level that you can get at any college. So if you're wondering, like, where can my kid get extra time on tests? In theory, pretty much at any college. But some students need more than that. They may need, let's say, academic coaching to help with executive function and organizational skills, time management. Many colleges offer that. Sometimes it's an additional cost. Sometimes it's included. They usually call it academic coaching in college. They don't usually call it executive function coaching, but it's kind of the same thing. So I think of that sort of like an a la carte service. They don't have a real program, but they have this one-off service that you can get. And then more sort of higher tier of services would be a comprehensive learning support program or an autism support program. So a learning support program could be for students with any sort of learning difference, dyslexia, learning disabilities, autism, ADHD. Some colleges have a program that's specific for autism or for specific diagnoses. And those comprehensive programs would have like all of the above. They'd, of course, still have the accommodations, and academic coaching is a pretty common service in these programs, but they may also have social events or social skills workshops. They might have priority registration for classes. There might be a separate place in the residence hall where these students can live together. There might be a whole suite of services. There could be a course on how to be more successful in college. And as Lori said, we do have a list on our website, on the Top College Consultants website, of colleges that offer these sort of higher levels of support. And I can put that in the chat later too. And I say here there are several ways to obtain support. I'm not going to go into detail about that here, but if you want me to explain, I'm happy to say more about that. In other words, you can get support at the college, you can hire someone privately. There's different ways to get that support, because you might fall in love with a college that doesn't really have very robust supports, but you still need those supports. So you can still make it work through different means. But the bottom line is, I want all students to know all of the college resources. Again, pretty much every college is going to have most of the things here, like mental health counseling and faculty office hours. And some of these things you might think sort of take for granted, faculty office hours, but there are students who don't even know what office hours means. And professors don't necessarily explain what that means, that there is a designated time that students can go with questions to their professors. That's just one example. Residence assistants in the residence hall who, students need to have a trusted mentor or authority figure that they can go to. It might be their favorite professor. It might be the RA in the dining hall, the residence hall. It might be a counselor that they've started seeing. They need to have someone they can go to when they're struggling so they can find out where the other resources are. Because sometimes students are shy and they're not just going to wander around saying, hey, where's the career services? But they can, go to, say, the RA in the residence hall and say, hey, I remember in orientation, they said something about clubs, or they said something about career services, but I can't remember. How do I find that? Or where do I find that? Or how do I sign up? It's good to have a contact person you can go to for more information. Of course, this information is usually available on the college's website too, but college websites really vary in terms of how easy they are to find what you need to find. So there's that. Clubs are a fantastic resource. There's a huge variety of clubs available, especially at larger colleges, including sometimes mental health clubs for students who struggle with mental health issues, or neurodiversity clubs for neurodivergent students. And then there's things you can create on your own as a student. Like you can create your own study group if you don't want to go meet with a tutor, but you feel like you could use more help. Um, you can kind of create your own resource sometimes. And of course, disability services for students with disabilities. So bottom line, think about college readiness early on. Think about working on those skills in high school, whether it's emotional skills, life skills, academic skills, and have a plan after high school to continue building on those skills and accessing the resources that you need. So I went through that pretty quickly. These are a few links to some of the things I mentioned. I wrote an article on college readiness, got an article on reasons to consider a gap year. The article I mentioned on getting into college is the easy part. There's my email address, eric@topcollegeconsultants.com.
Mhm.
Thank you for hanging out with me at the end of the day, and tell me what questions you have.
Mhm. Well, we've got quite a few questions, and actually, one of the parents was just asking if you could go back to, I think the slide where your contact information and the name of the articles.
Oh,
Uh,
sure.
yeah.
Hold on. I got to share my screen again.
Okay. But there's some excellent questions here in the chat and more
Great.
coming through. Um,
Yeah. So, and these links are all available on the Top College Consultants website. It's topcollegeconsultants.com. And you can't click on them because they're on they're on my screen. But I can share the slides with you, Lori, if you want, if
yeah.
folks want to provide their contact information. I can also put links to any of these in the chat. Um, if I can stop sharing my screen, I can copy the links.
Mhm. And I'd be happy to share the slides as well. I
Okay,
just put your email in the chat. So,
thanks.
when you were talking about college readiness programs, we had two questions about it. One is, what are they exactly? Are college readiness programs specifically for executive function support or academics?
That's a great question. I don't think anyone's ever asked that before, even though it seems like a pretty important question.
Mhm.
So the college readiness programs I'm usually referring to are, again, most students we work with have learning differences, so we're often kind of focused on programs for that population. If you're in high school and you're looking around for summer programs, you'll probably encounter these pre-college programs. They are available throughout the country, just a way to sort of get a taste of college. Those can be a great way to kind of see what it's like to live on a college campus, but they're usually not really focused on building skills in high school. Um, and by college readiness programs, what I'm referring to, yes, definitely to Grace's question,
Mhm.
executive function is definitely a piece of that for many of these programs that I have in mind. Some of them may have a sort of a stronger emotional mental health component as well. Some may have more of a social skills or socializing component too. If you're talking about like a whole year-long program, a gap year program, or a PG program, so PG or post-grad programs are frequently located at private high schools. Not all of them, but many of them are located at private high schools. And so those programs definitely have an academic component where students are kind of students who have been maybe not the strongest students in high school have another year to work on their academic skills. But if it's a PG year program for students with learning differences, it's definitely going to have an executive function component to it as well.
Excellent. One of the parents is asking, where might parents or students look for a college readiness program? Is that something that you could get through a community college or elsewhere?
Um, yeah, that's people have asked. So Lori mentioned earlier that hold on a second, that I have a list on our website of I just grab the link. List on our website of colleges with support programs for students with learning differences. I just put the link in the chat there. And sometimes people say, well, what about a list of all the summer programs for students with learning differences? What about the gap year programs? Uh, I know them and I have sort of my own list, but I haven't put a list out there publicly. So we frequently give programs. There's the Gap Year Association, which is a place where you can see a lot of gap year programs. There's Teen Life. Teen Life Media has lots of programs listed too. So I don't know if that's exactly what Amy was asking as far as a resource, like a list of the programs. But if you're wondering, like, where are the specific programs for students, certain populations, kind of my colleagues and I just know those programs.
Um, what do autism support programs entail? I'm assuming that's within a college, university or college.
Yeah, so if you look at if you go to the database that I put the link in the chat for, and that is a database, by the way, meaning you can like sort, you can sort by state if you're wondering, I just want to find the ones in California, I just want to find the ones in Texas. You can sort it by state. Um, and then I also have kind of broken it down to what populations they're for, also how much the programs cost, because they do cost, most of the time they cost quite a bit extra above and beyond the already high cost of college. There are a few colleges that don't charge more from them, but that's kind of a shrinking pool, unfortunately. So the autism support programs typically have all the things that a learning support program would have, like academic coaches, but they usually also have a social piece, and that may be social events, social skills workshops, some kind of social curriculum. So again, it would typically be kind of a robust suite of supports. Typically, students are meeting with an academic coach or a learning support, a learning specialist at least once a week, sometimes a couple times a week. There might be a mentor, there might be a peer mentor. That would be an upperclassman or a student, either a student who's older or a student who's already gone through the support program, who's now kind of come back in a mentor role. Those are great. I think that's a great service to have. Imagine if you're a freshman at college and you're introverted, you have social anxiety, and you're like, I really like anime, or I really like math, or I really like theater, but I'm too shy to just go to a club by myself. Well, if you have a mentor, you can go together and you have kind of a buddy to walk you through it and say, come on, let's go. I'll go with you the first time. And, we can, kind of help you break the ice. So those are some of the services that programs tend to have. It varies from college to college, but those are some examples.
Mhm.
And I belong to the College Autism Network, which is a group of college autism support programs, and they're an amazing. They are so dedicated. I can't even begin to tell you.
That's actually really great to hear. I think what parents also are curious about is how do you go about getting support? So you talked about different options for support. How does a student go about accessing those programs and options.
You mean like the support programs that are located in the colleges or?
Yeah, I think the support programs located in the colleges, but also, disability services, mental health services, anything that is available to a student.
Mhm.
And I don't know if, Amy, if you wanted to elaborate more on it, but
Yeah, well, sometimes when you're applying to a college, some of the colleges that have these support programs will actually ask you within the Common App, are you interested in the Arch support program at Dean College,
mm,
or the PAL program at Curry College? And if you check yes, then they provide a link to you. Here's the link to the application to that program.
mm,
Um, in other cases, you kind of just have to go to that page on the college's website and apply. Usually there's an application process of some kind. It might involve an interview, it might involve providing, there's a good chance it's going to involve providing documentation like a neuropsych evaluation or an IEP from high school. So there'll be an application process. Um, and then they would, if you go to that college, they would kind of onboard you and explain to you how you access the program. I don't know if that fully answers the question there. Again, there are also independent programs like companies that provide services to students who are at colleges that don't have these programs. Some of those are non-residential programs. You just live at the college like any other student, but you're getting some support that's kind of piped in virtually or perhaps in person, depending on the program. And then there are some residential programs that where you would actually live at the program and attend a nearby college. And that's kind of like the highest level of support.
wow.
Some students need that level of support. It can be very expensive. Um, but there are also, and I hope we're not going to too far afield, but I encourage families to explore public benefits because sometimes they can really help make some of these resources affordable. So vocational rehab in some states can help pay for education, post-secondary education and training. And in California, the regional centers, if you're a regional center client, it can help pay for certain support programs that are located in California. I've seen students get some very expensive programs paid for by the regional center, for example. And
Mhm,
those are just,
mhm. That's great.
if I didn't hit all the facets of the question, feel free to bring me back to.
Mhm. Um, do you have any resources for gap year programs? And I just want to also ask a question that I hear from a lot of parents. Are gap years worth it? And what is that? How does that look, for a student applying to various programs?
Yeah, well, let me just say again that taking a gap year doesn't have to mean going to a program. Taking a gap year just means you're not going straight to college from high school. A gap year could mean that you are working and actually ending up with more money at the end of the year than at the beginning. The gap year programs, the structured gap year programs, like the ones we've been talking about, can be really expensive. Like imagine adding on another year of college. So that's, not a trivial consideration. Um, I, and if we're working with students to talk about gap years, we're talking about what are the things you want to accomplish during the gap year. Sometimes students are taking a gap year just because they want a break. I've been in school since I was 5 years old. I just want a year where I'm not in school before I do another 4 years of school. That's a perfectly legitimate reason to take a gap year. So, but in other cases, the gap year is to work on specific skills. Like, they need to be more mature. They need to build their social skills, their time management skills, and so on. And the structured programs help with that. So we help students kind of find the programs that are right for them. Like I said, the Gap Year Association lists some of those programs, and there are gap year consultants that do just that.
Mhm,
Those are some examples. Of course, you could Google them too, but we know the programs that are specialized for this population, so we're frequently kind of directing folks to those programs.
mhm. I don't know if anybody had any other questions to put in the chat, but I'd love to opportunity to ask you another question, Eric. Uh,
Sure.
we
And
get
if
a
there's any links you want me to put in the chat,
okay.
that's fine.
Yeah, I think the question that comes up for a lot of families is when is the best time to reach out to a college counselor? Um, is that 12th grade year when rising senior, or what's an ideal time
Uh-huh.
to do that?
Uh, no, that is not the ideal time. For a whole bunch of reasons. One, in our case, being that we are full. We can't. We're getting people reaching out. I've turned away people this week already who are seniors. I know another consultant in California who, and other parts of the country who do have openings, but we're just, we like to start with students early on, ninth grade, 10th grade, 11th grade at the latest, if possible. We do take seniors when we have space. We just happen to be full at this point. The other thing about, starting senior years, you just don't have a lot of time. There's not a lot of very long on-ramp to build the college list and figure out if you're college ready and make the decision about a gap year and all the stuff we've been talking about. Um, I start working with kids in ninth grade, 10th grade, to figure out what they're interested in. If they say, well, I want to be an architect, I want to be an engineer, I want to be um, a, a writer, then we can think about, okay, so what should you do over the summer? What courses should you be taking? What kinds of things can you expose yourself to, internships, jobs, to explore and pursue that interest? What kinds of skills do you need to work on? Do you need an executive function coach now to kind of build those skills in high school? In junior year, it's all about the college list. It's all about getting out and exploring colleges, go to some nearby colleges, figure out what you do and don't like, and start building sort of a profile of the ideal college. Having been to a variety of different colleges, big, small, urban, rural, suburban, public, private, STEM focused, liberal arts, I can now say, here's a couple colleges I really liked because they were just the right size for me and they weren't too urban or they weren't too big or whatever it might be. Or I love the dorms or I love the way the campus was laid out.
Mhm,
Students react to different things. Sometimes it's the food, who knows? But during junior year, we have a lot of time. If we start, before junior year, we have that whole year to figure out what would be some good matches for them. And
mhm,
for us, and for all the consultants that I know, it's all about finding the right match. It's not about getting into the best college. It's the college that's best for you.
mhm,
So once we figure out, who is your tribe, who are your people, where are you really going to feel like you fit in and make friends and have the supports you need and the academics that you're interested in, then when junior year is finished, we can dive into the application process. If folks come to us in senior year, it's like we're trying to do all this in a really short time.
mhm,
Not to say that it can't be done, but it's definitely more compressed.
mhm. Yeah. And I really appreciate what you're saying. I think it is about finding the, your tribe and finding the best place that suits you and being able to take advantage of the wonderful opportunity that it is.
Yeah, I mean, on paper, if you say, I already know I want to study aerospace engineering. I actually have students this year who want to study that. Last year, I had students who wanted to study ornithology. That's bird science. That really helps you narrow it down. Which colleges offer what I want to major in. So you may find those colleges and say, this looks perfect. They have exactly the major I'm interested in. I'm sure I'm going to be happy there. The thing is, if you don't make friends there, you're probably going to want to transfer. You're probably not going to be happy there, even if they have
Mhm,
the studies you want. So, as you said, finding your people is so important. And this is something students can much more readily determine if they can get to colleges in person. That's not always practical because maybe you're trying to go to college in another part of the country and you just don't have the time or money to be flying around and touring all these different colleges scattered around. So it's okay if you can't tour in person. There's plenty of, there's international students who come to the US every year who have never set foot on the campus that they're starting at. But if you can go, then you can pick up pretty quickly. Are these the kind of students that I'm going to be able to make friends with? Are these students that I feel like I'm going to fit in with?
Mhm.
And I get this feedback from students every year where they say like, oh my God, I just loved it. I just knew when I was there, the students looked happy, they were friendly, they were, it's just the right vibe. I felt like I could definitely see myself being there. Or conversely, you know, um, just not my group. I just, they were too preppy for me. They were too athletic focused for me. It wasn't my crowd. Even though I thought I was going to like it, I don't think it's my kind of place.
Mhm.
So when getting on campus can be super helpful. But that's just one way to explore colleges. There's college fairs. There's a lot of other um, approaches too. Bigger high
Mhm.
schools have college reps coming to the schools. I know smaller high schools don't always do that, but um, there's college fairs all over the country. There's virtual college fairs where you can learn about a lot of colleges in a short time.
Mhm. Another question that comes up a lot, for parents when we're talking with them and as their student is preparing um, to start the application process is, how much should a student talk about a learning difference that they have? Um, is that an important thing to disclose? Or is it something that they don't have to disclose? And do you have any advice about that?
Absolutely. I love this topic. I actually did a whole presentation at a conference uh, a couple of years ago, which I have a recording of. And you can find all this stuff on our website. I'm just going to put another link in the chat. Give me a second
And I
on
just
this
also
very
want to,
question. What's that?
yeah, and I just want to add not only the learning difference, but maybe also, a mental health challenge or a health challenge.
Yeah, yeah. And this sometimes is a point of contention between students and their parents, because sometimes students are like, I've been struggling with depression or an eating disorder, and I've been going to therapy, and this is a big part of my life, and I can't wait to write about this in my essay. And parents are like, you should, I read online that you shouldn't talk about that in an essay. Don't do that. And that sometimes becomes a bit of a flashpoint. So the short answer is it is up to the student. We honor the student's autonomy, and it's the student's process, and I respect student's individual decision. It's their application. So we talk through the pros and cons of disclosing or not disclosing. That's the short answer. The longer answer is if there's something in your application that might need explanation, then it can be very useful to put that in the Common App. There's a section we call the additional information section, where it doesn't have to be an essay. It could just be something like, I didn't take any foreign languages in high school because my school didn't offer them, or because I have a foreign language disability waiver. That could be the whole explanation. You don't have to say what the disability was. Or maybe you say, I've had students whose grades went up during high school because they got diagnosed with ADHD and they were put on medication and they got the accommodations that they needed. So they want to explain that, hey, this is why I didn't do so well in freshman year, but you can see in the middle of sophomore year, my grades went up because I got diagnosed. And now you can see I'm firing on all cylinders.
Mhm.
So sometimes that can actually work to a student's advantage to disclose. Whereas, without that explanation, a college could be looking at a transcript and saying, no foreign languages. That's a problem. Or, geez, what happened in freshman year? They got terrible grades. What's that all about? Without an explanation, you're leaving it to the colleges to make a decision or fill in the blanks.
Mhm.
So that's sort of one type of situation where you're kind of explaining something, but not necessarily writing an essay about it. The other thing, I call it identity focused disclosure, is where you want to share it because you feel like it's a key part of your identity. And this could be true for various aspects of a student's identity, their gender, sexuality, race, as well as neurodivergence or disability. Some students feel like this is a key part of who I am. And you as a college, you're asking me, to write an essay sharing who I am. Well, my being autistic or having a mental health history, this is my journey. So I'm going to share it with you so you know my story. And
Mhm.
many students feel like they want colleges to really understand that aspect of themselves. And to be clear, I've had many students do this every year, and I've never seen any evidence that it hurts them. I had a student a couple of years ago who wrote his college essay about autism. He got into MIT. You might think, well, there's probably a lot of autistic students at MIT, but the point still stands. This happens, every year. Lots of our students write about these challenges and do great.
Mhm.
I see a question from Danielle, totally different topic or somewhat different topic. How important is it to take honors courses in high school? If you have disabled students getting good grades and managing stress well with regular courses, should you consider maintain that course load or taking on something more difficult? So, great question. I love that.
Mhm.
To me, the student is number one. Absolutely. Their physical and mental well-being is the most important thing, even above doing well in high school. Doing well in school might be number two, or getting along with your family, but their well-being is paramount. So if taking more challenging courses is going to put their mental health at risk, no, they shouldn't take more challenging courses at the expense of their mental health. But if they are flying through high school and they can handle the extra challenge, they have the emotional bandwidth to take more challenging courses. Absolutely. The two most important things that colleges look for across the board, essentially, it's the transcript. The most important thing that colleges look for across the board is what's on the transcript, the courses you took and the grades you got. So if you got straight A's, that's great. But if you didn't challenge yourself and you took just sort of college prep courses, you're not going to get into the Stanfords and the Berkeleys of the world. You may get into plenty of colleges, but not the most competitive colleges without what we call rigor on the transcript. Um, and if you're not trying to get into super selective colleges, that's fine. I had a student a few years ago who got straight A's throughout high school, not a single B, did not challenge himself at all intentionally. He was a very anxious person, didn't want to, he was too anxious to get anything less than an A. And he got into every college he applied to, but he wasn't applying to super selective colleges. But if you're trying to kind of get into more challenging courses and colleges, more selective colleges, then that rigor absolutely matters. And for some systems like the UCs and Cal States, it's pretty clearly spelled out. You get extra points literally for those courses. I hope
That is
that.
an excellent question. Um,
Do colleges truly consider a student's course load in context? Oh, and by the way, just to add on to my answer to Danielle's question, colleges are, except for systems like Cal States that are just looking at your transcript, colleges do look at the whole context, including what school you attend. I had a student ask me today, should I go to an easier school so I can get a higher rank in the school? Should I switch high schools? I'm like, colleges are looking at you within the context of your school. If you're at a really powerhouse high school, colleges know that school, and if you are not the strongest student in the school, they still know what that means. So when Grace, I saw the word context in Grace's question, it reminds me of that. Do colleges truly consider a student's course load in contexts, like some schools offer 10x the AP courses classes of others? Absolutely. This speaks to what I was just saying. So if you are at a school that doesn't offer AP courses, colleges do not expect you to have taken AP courses. You do not get penalized for not taking courses that were not available to you. So that is absolutely the case. That being said, there's often an opportunity to do dual enrollment where you're taking courses at a community college and getting high school and college credit. So if you had the chance to do dual enrollment and you didn't, then you're not taking full advantage of the challenging curriculum available to you. But colleges know the high schools. These reps travel around the country. They have access to something called a school profile. They can see the courses available. So that is certainly taken into account.
Mhm.
Ages to be at certain high schools, there's a lot of inequities in our country. I'm not going to go into all of that, the various kinds of inequities. Students at certain schools are probably advantaged over students at other schools. But there's usually ways around that, like you do a summer, program that's highly selective, or you do dual enrollment. I have students do all sorts of things, students working as TAs and, you know, students who are doing independent projects. Students have taught themselves, coding on their own. So there's lots of ways to sort of add to what's available at your school to show colleges that, hey, I did all this other stuff.
Mhm.
And I have students with lots of different interests doing lots of different things. That's one of the things I love about this work is just meeting these students who have all these cool interests. One of my students, is into horses. Another one's I always have students into computer coding and so on.
Mhm.
So, and students find ways to pursue these interests, whether it's through a formal summer program that's competitive or just doing something on their own.
Mhm. Here's another question.
Yeah.
Have you seen, what have you seen with students from one-on-one schools like Tilden? Have they been able to make the transition from one-on-one to regular classroom and be successful in colleges?
You're probably better qualified to answer that than I am.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I have seen students really do very well in colleges. And, one of the notes I actually took down from your presentation, Eric, is, that self-awareness, self-advocacy, and self-management. That's a big thing that we do as part of our program. And, a school like Tilden in particular, where it's really important to us for our students to transfer well to wherever they're going to go after Tilden, whether that's a traditional high school or a college or whatever they're going to do, and that we're meeting the goals. What I've seen is that Tilden students are the students that really take advantage of the opportunities in college. They're the ones, joining sororities and fraternities and, you know, taking advantage of internships. Going to office hours is a big thing, because they're used to talking to their teacher and advocating for themselves and asking questions if they don't understand something. So it's fantastic, and our kids do really well. I mean, I've have several parents who contact me throughout the year, said, "Gosh, my kid is graduating, and they're going off to their master's program, and in a variety of fields. Some are going into neuroscience, some are going into psychology, and these are kids who, when they came to Tilden, I mean, parents were concerned, are they going to go to college? You know? And there's just so much that a student learns about themselves at a school like Tilden and at one-to-one schools um, that can be very beneficial to them.
Well said. I would be hard pressed to top that. I would say though, we not only work with students who go to one-to-one schools like Tilden and competitors that I won't name, or alternatives that I won't name, but we also work with homeschool students, and that's a similar concern that people, well, geez, the students only been at home. How are they going to do um, in college? I would argue, as I think you alluded to, that in some ways they're better prepared because they've had to be so independent and work on those self-advocacy skills. And in a place like Tilden, staff and teachers have the ability to see what students need to work on and guide students in a way that just where students could easily fall through the cracks in, let's say, a big public school where as long as their grades are okay, nobody's necessarily pulling them aside and saying, hey, you might need to work on your this skill or that skill. Um, it's the squeaky wheel that
Mhm.
gets oil. So I think in some ways they're uniquely prepared. But students can also supplement that, right, with dual enrollment and so on. So I think it's great for students to do different things during high school, like dual enrollment courses. Take a community college course to prove to yourself and to colleges that, like, hey, I'm just fine in the classroom as well.
Mhm.
It's not completely throwing me off. Or do a summer pre-college program, partly just, again, to have a taste of college, to see, like, hey, I was in a college environment, I was in a classroom, I took a course. Yeah, it was only 2 or 3 weeks, but it was kind of like a college setting, and it was great. Um,
I 100% agree about the dual enrollment, and it's something that we encourage, 11th graders and 12th graders to definitely take advantage of that experience. Um, and while they're enrolled at Tilden, so that, if things don't go as they had expected, or if they need more support, we're there for your kids. So
mhm.
let's see, Renee asked, would Cosmos program count as a pre-college program?
Yes. Mhm. That's the second time today someone's asked me about Cosmos. I don't know why that is, but absolutely, yes. And and I prefer programs like Cosmos that are truly selective and competitive to what some people call pay to play, where as long as you kind of are willing to pay the price, you can join the program. Those programs are okay too, but they're not going to carry as much weight in college applications as a more selective, rigorous program. So if you want to go to a summer program just because it looks like fun and you want to try it out, totally fine. But they're not necessarily going to help you get into college. But they may help you be more comfortable transitioning to college.
Mhm.
I also find those programs can help you um, focus your interests. So when I was in high school, I thought I wanted to be an astronomer or astrophysicist. I went to a program, an NSF program called the Summer Science Program, which still exists, and focused on, like, creating a mapping the trajectory of an asteroid. And it was very intense, and it was really good. And I had a great time there. And it also helped me that I didn't want to become an astronomer. So super helpful to figure that out in high school. And if you decide that you do want to go into the field that is related to your summer program, then you can kind of take next steps, do informational interviews with folks in the field, look
Mhm.
for internships, and so on.
Mhm.
I think we're probably getting to the end of the time. I don't want to overstay my welcome.
Yeah, well, this has been so great, Eric. Thank you so much for taking the time, and thank you, parents, for your fantastic questions. Um, and I will share your slides, Eric, and your contact information. I really love his program, and always reach out when I have a question myself. And I just wanted to invite you all again to our next um, month's meeting, again with Classroom Matters, and the topic is parenting for ADHD. But thank you for being here. And again, thank you again, Eric.
Thanks to everyone for coming. Great questions, great conversation.
Mhm.
Thank you.
I hope
Bye.
you all have a nice evening. All right. Take care.